Folks who are just getting on, it's good to see you. We're glad you're here. Thanks for being on time. We're going to give folks another minute or two. A few more folks have joined us. Thanks for being here. We're going to get started in just a minute.
How's everybody doing? Hey, Donna. Hey, Elijah. Hey, Daniel. Hey, Tamar. Hey, Matthew. Hey, Ms. Bruce. Hey, Phil. Um, Donna, you're rocking the Ravens pretty hard over there.
I'm in my husband's man cave. I'm not into all this. If you go further back, that's where the salon is.
Nice.
Yeah, but it's kind of cool down here. So I had to get away from all the noise. My granddaughter's here for the weekend. So I had to escape somewhere. And it's not Raven season, so he won't be down here for a while. How's everybody?
Good.
Hello.
All right. So it is 5:31. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to this third meeting of the Trauma Informed Care Task Force. Really excited to keep the conversation going. Just a really quick update on the legislative side. As you all know, this is sort of one part of the Elijah Cummings Healing City Act, which also mandates training for all of our city agencies in healing-centered, trauma-informed, trauma-responsive care, as well as an agency review where, in partnership with us, the task force, the health department, agencies are going to really take a deep dive and a hard look at their own policies, practices, and procedures to identify ways in which we, city government, may inadvertently be causing harm, and to stop us from doing that, to reverse those policies. Excited that we've now gone through a first tranche of mini trainings for cabinet heads. So all of the mayor's cabinet got a miniaturized version of the training, as well as all of my colleagues on the city council. And then just last week, we also did a training with media, which was really interesting. And part of what we hope to accomplish through this work is real cultural transformation, away from the sort of punitive punishment first, if it bleeds, it leads kind of approach, to a healing centered, trauma responsive approach. And so we felt like media, the folks who tell the stories and often tell them in ways that can feel exploitive and just sort of lacking in larger context, we felt it was really important for those folks to also get some exposure to this training. And so that was last week, and it went really, really, really well. Just as a reminder, just some basic task force ground rules. The meeting is being recorded in order to keep us in line with the Open Meetings Act. Keep yourself on mute, use the small hand raise function or the chat if you want to engage, and then there'll be times to jump right in. This meeting is going to go till 7 o'clock, so feel free to grab a snack or dinner or whatever it is you need. And keep in mind, we have a limited time, so we're going to try to move quickly. We are also today going to break up into 4 groups, breakout rooms, to do the round the horn, get to know you question. And that's because we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to share and to have their voice heard. And we want to be efficient and expedient. And there are a lot of people on this task force, which is a great thing, but we are going to break up into 4 breakout rooms. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Anne for some logistics on that.
Awesome. Thanks, Zeke. So I have created breakout rooms. It should automatically take folks into your breakout room. There is going to be a pocket of folks that stays here so that it can continue to be recorded and continue to be broadcast on the YouTube live for the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. We each breakout group has a staff facilitator. So I will be in this room with, it's not a breakout room. Matthew Reeds from the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success will be in one of the rooms. Rachel Broy from the Health Department will be in one of the rooms. And I believe Ebony from MOCFS will also be in one of the rooms. The question for today is, what does resilience look like to you? So when you're called on, if you could share your name, your pronouns, and what resilience looks like to you. And that is really broad, but just want to start that conversation around what resilience looks like. So I am going to go ahead and open up the rooms, and your facilitator should be there to get you started. Lindsay, Gavin, the room that you're going to may not have a facilitator yet. So if Ebony's not there, Lindsay, can I ask you to just move through the list of people in your room? And
I'm here.
Good, Ebony's here. Never mind, Lindsay, you're off the hook. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and open up rooms for people to leave. We have 10 minutes. So we're gonna regroup here at 5:46. All right. I'm going to give folks just a minute, and then I'll start with this group here. I'm going to type the question real quick so everyone can see it. All right, so my name is Ann Coy, and I support I'm the staff that supports the implementation of the Elijah Cummings Healing City Act. My pronouns are she, hers. And resilience looks like recognizing harm or hurt, but then being able to move productively and grow from that. I struggle talking about resilience because often I think about our kids and I wish we didn't have to ask them to be resilient. But then I also think about the traits that I want my own children to have, and resilience is one of them. I want them to struggle and grow and be able to overcome and be stronger. So that's what resilience looks like to me. And I am just going to move down the list as I see it. So, young elder, can I have you go next?
Sure. So my name is Young Elder. I'm 19. My pronouns are she and her. And to me, resilience means, honestly, like in the cliche way, you could say, never giving up, but like turned up like all the way to like 100. Cause just saying never give up is kind of like, oh, just don't quit. But when you resilient, it's different. Like no matter what, like you're going to keep going regardless of the things that's like preventing you and stopping you and just making everything hard.
Thanks, Elder. All right. Monica.
Hello, everyone. My name is Monica Guerrero Vasquez, and resilience to me is being able to recognize where you are, to reset and restart, and that happens. That is very difficult, but I think it gets you to a point where you can continue going, and that happens, with people experiencing violence and poverty and hunger and like other things, stress, and so I think the resilience is being able to recognize where you are, restart, and continue.
Thank you. Desiree. Desiree had messaged me earlier and said her internet connection wasn't great, so she may only be able to hear and not participate. So Desiree, feel free to use the chat if you want. I don't want to like skip you over, but I also don't want to put you on the spot if it's not working. All right, Kevin.
Hey, family. It is the ability for me. It was interesting that you asked that because I wrestled with that with my class today. It is the ability to recover, but resilience from difficulties. But resilience to me, it looks like I'm a recover from difficulties, but I want to go beyond the step of where I fell from, or so it looks like beyond where I recovered from to a little bit more expansive. So, because I think sometimes people can be resilient, but then maladaptive and end up where you started at the place that you fell from. So it deals with a little bit, not just for me to recover, but recover beyond. So I know that was a little bit deep, but yeah.
I'm grateful for the range of answers here. Thank you for that. That's it. I mean, that really is, I think, so valuable to have these different perspectives. Mika.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's see. Hello. I'm Mika Danby. My pronouns are she, her, and resilience looks like to me the ability to create safety and safe space for oneself and community.
Thank you. And Neha.
Hi, everyone. A very good afternoon. And I'm Neha Mishra. My pronouns are she, her, and I am volunteering with the Elijah Cummings Healing City Act, and I'm really grateful to be a part of this group. So resilience is something that we discussed, and I've thought about it, and I think it's an everyday choice, and every day that comes with every action that you take on a daily basis, because you're struggling to do so many things, and yet you kind of overcome struggles, even if it's to kind of get up to work out to so you kind of overcome those, and that's where I guess resilience comes, and I could be wrong about this. Yeah.
I don't think there's a wrong answer
Yeah.
in this round's question. So thanks, Neha. And Zeke. I don't always mean to make you last, Zeke, but in the alphabetical order, it's just how it happens. So
I get it. It's a blessing and a curse. Zeke Cohen, District 1 City Council, he, his pronouns, and to me, so there's a family that lives in my district. They're from Iraq. They left during the most recent war. They are considered refugees, and the father used to be a physician, and now he is driving Uber. And I talked to him last week about what that was like and how challenging it's going to be for him to get medically accredited in the United States and have to deal with a whole lot of stuff. And he's just like, look, I'm here, and we were able to leave in a moment of extreme violence in our country, and I'm grateful to be here, and I want to, I know it's going to happen. So I was just remain pretty struck by that conversation and by this guy who, like I said, was a physician and is now doing a job that, is, doesn't pay much, but he's doing it because he wants to support his family. So to me, that's what resilience looks like.
thank you, Zeke. And Corey, I think you were in a group, so I think you're back because you're done, or are you back because you had a question? I can't hear you. No. No, we can't hear you.
Chat it out, maybe.
Yeah, you can chat it out, or you can rejoin. All right. Well, thank you all. I feel like this was quick, but I am grateful to have heard different perspectives on what resilience looks like. I am going to go call everyone else back, so you all can sit tight for just a minute while they all re-enter.
Sorry, Ann, this is Desiree. I'm trying to move to some place where this connection is halfway decent.
Well, if you want to share what resilience looks like to you, we would love to hear it.
Absolutely. So resiliency, to me, resilience looks like triumph over trauma. It looks like the ability to create, utilizing the coping skills, creating joy, and being able to move into a place where you're like more triumphant now than before. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. So I think, do we have everyone back in?
I think just about. Yeah, I think so.
All right. So good to see everyone again. We are now going to head into the get to know you portion of the meeting. So we've been doing these little vignettes for folks to share a little bit about who they are and what they do. We decided, based on the past week, which was amazing, but to extend it from 3 minutes to 5 minutes with some time if you want, like in one of those minutes for a question or two. But we just felt like trying to cram people's stuff into 3 minutes was really tough. So we're gonna make it 5 minutes moving forward. And I think today we're gonna start with Donna Bruce. So Donna, if you are ready, take it away.
Okay. All right, and I'll take questions at the end. I'm going to share a video.
Donna, when you share,
No, Ann is going to share the video.
I was going to say, I'm happy to share it, or you can.
Yeah, Ann is going to share the video. I'm not that tech savvy, so I'm pulling on Ann tonight. Please, thank you. You got to get an Ann.
Great. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Donna Bruce. Who is Donna Bruce? I am a mother, a wife, a beautician, a survivor. I'm actively living a healthy lifestyle. As a young adult, I fell prey to drug addiction and human trafficking. I was in pain for many years. I accumulated several charges on my record and experienced many jail cells. Through that pain and misery and degradation, I turned that pain into purpose. A purpose to give back to those who suffer with trauma in our communities. I became a certified peer recovery specialist who specializes in family. I gained my certification through the Maryland Addiction Behavioral Health Board, where through my lived experiences, I'm able to reach back and help those who struggle with mental health and drug addiction. I also became a senior cosmetologist and educator. I'm actively on the steering committee for Healing City, Baltimore, where I serve as vice chair of community and engagements. I'm honored to say that through Healing City, I spearheaded the Destiny's Dream Scholarship. With other Baltimore stylists, where students at Mervo can now receive $1,000 towards supplies needed to be successful in the cosmetology program there at Mervo. I currently volunteer to help recovering addicts do their hair to help them feel better inside and out while building self-esteem. I was recently nominated by Councilman Zeke Cohen and sworn in by Mayor Scott to become a member of the Trauma-Informed Care Task Force, the first of its kind in any city. Through my trafficking experiences, I had the honor to testify on bills that were passed into law to help survivors move on and live a healthy lifestyle for themselves. Senate Bill 688, House Bill 827, Child Sex Trafficking Screening and Services Act, to provide specialized services for high-risk youth that are being trafficked, and House Bill 242, True Freedom Bill Act, where survivors such as myself can now have my charges vacated from my record. I'm truly honored to be a part of something that's making waves for others. We are a movement, and I'm happy to be here. I am Donna Bruce. Wow. All right, guys, I've got tears in my eyes every time I look at that. I think it was Brittany, we were in our small groups and you were saying that you get calls in where people who are passionate about, legislation that they want to see change. And I am that person. So while you were saying it, I was like, that's me. Let's put it into law. Let's get these charges off of these records. These young people, give them an opportunity to get the services and screening instead of incarcerating them once they get arrested. Ask them what's going on. Are they being trafficked? asking specific questions. So it's good that we have this trauma-informed task force that we can now create legislation to ask the specific questions that people aren't asking, human trafficking, drug abuse, and things like that. So yeah, it's been a journey, and I'm open for questions. I think I probably have 2 minutes. Good, no questions.
So I would just say Donna is one of my heroes. Gotten to know her really well over these last couple of years, and watched her start this scholarship for Destiny, who was really tragically killed outside of her barbershop. The other thing I got to see Donna do was she mentioned she's a peer recovery specialist. And so I got to see Donna and some folks go to barbershops across the city. Donna's also a cosmetologist, and provide Narcan and support and offer services to people that want to experience recovery or that are afraid of potentially overdosing. So Donna, I was curious for you, why barbershops, like what, and what that experience has been like of going and doing what could only call like a ministry in these barbershops.
Well, with the barbershops and beauty salons, they are the sanctuaries. People trust us with their lives. They trust us with their hair. We know their deepest secrets. They may be addicted to drugs or have a family member that's addicted to drugs. And we were able to just give them the resources firsthand. So we're not sending them through third parties. Here's a Narcan kit. Somebody may go out in the barbershop, and that specific barbershop, one that we went to, was down in the heart of Baltimore near Lexington Market. And if you know anything about Lexington Market, it's a high drug traffic area. And we were able to stop people on the street and with no judgment and say, hey, could we just offer you a Narcan kit? And so barbershops and beauty salons, again, are, Mark, I'm going to use it, non-traditional spaces. You're going to make me pay for that. Non-traditional spaces where they can get help, in untraditional ways. So we're breaking out of the same routines and religious ways that we do things to say, hey, we're frontline, here's the help. Here's how can we help you? Let us give it to you. Okay. And what better person than somebody who, such as myself, who have been there and understand that it may be embarrassing. So know how to handle people accordingly.
Thanks, Donna. I see Councilmember Ramos has her hand up, and so we have about 30 seconds before we need to move to the next person.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Ms. Bruce, for everything you're doing. Mervo is in my district, so I'm really proud of you for everything that you've done and you've been through, and also proud of you for helping our young people, really be able to see that they can succeed. And that's so important. So, and all the work that you've done really has made a difference to those young people and many others that are going to come before. So thank you so much for sharing. And I look forward to meeting you in person. And thank you for everything you're doing. I just wanted to say thank you. I don't have a question.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Councilwoman.
Awesome. All right, Donna, all the love to you. That was great. We appreciate you. There will be a time where we all get to meet and we're not just little boxes on a screen. Hopefully that day will be soon. But all right, we are going to move to Mika for our second presentation.
Good afternoon again, everyone. I'm Mika Danby. I'm the creator of Fight Black Be More and the co-creator of the Stop Oppressive Seizures Fund. And I think the saying is, the fruit, the tree best by its fruit. And so I wanted to just share an example of the work that Fight Black Be More is doing in community. My name is Mika Danby, creator of Fight Black Be More Stop Oppressive Seizures Fund. The fund seeks to disrupt and dismantle predatory systems that erode property rights and ownership while decolonizing our understanding of property. Today, we're going to talk about the profane impact of Baltimore's tax sale. I call into this space the energy of Eloise and Levi Porter, my great aunt and uncle, who bought a home in Park Heights in the 1960s. At one point, my family had to fight to keep that home from being lost to tax sale. It is in their memory that I come to this work. The fight against tax sale continues. This year alone, more than 3,800 homeowners in Baltimore are at risk of being saddled with interest, attorney's fees, other fees, and even foreclosure if they are unable to avoid the tax sale. Many of us know that Baltimore's property tax rate is a problem. But what we don't know is that the tax assessments are too. The Center for Municipal Finance analysis of Baltimore property tax assessments from 2009 through 2018 shows that the least expensive houses in Baltimore are assessed at 164% of their sales value, while the most expensive houses are assessed at 68% of their sales value. Simply, the properties in Baltimore with the lowest sales price have assessed values of nearly 2.5 times their market value. These assessed values are the basis for property tax bills. It will surprise no one that the properties with the lowest sales values are concentrated in the Black Butterfly, the collection of Baltimore neighborhoods with predominantly Black populations. This evidence suggests that homeowners in the Butterfly are being overassessed. The result of an inflated tax rate and assessments are unaffordable property tax bills for homeowners who have been the victim of so much of the government's discriminatory and violent economic policies, of which tax sale is one of the most onerous. The 12 to 18% interest charged on properties that go into tax sale goes into the pocket of investors. You tell me where investors can get a guaranteed return like that. Exactly. Nowhere, except out of the pockets of mostly Black, elderly, and low-income homeowners, whose homes are targeted by investors because they are more likely to pay than the speculators who have abandoned their properties and their responsibility. Then there are the attorney's fees, which can rise to $2,400 or more if an estate has to be opened, and in many cases must be paid before the tax is owed to the city. When you combine that with the reality that the investor and the attorney can be the same person, and that many homeowners wrongly think that the attorneys represent them, you have government-sanctioned predatory practice in full swing, leaving families suddenly to find themselves thousands of dollars in debt or facing the painful reality of losing their home. Within a year of tax sale, a $1,000 tax bill will have ballooned to $3,300 if it remains unpaid. Not even COVID-19, a global health pandemic which requires social distancing and has caused dire financial stress for so many, has stopped this practice. In fact, last year, more than 200 tax sale foreclosure filings occurred in Baltimore. We can't afford to have 200 more families made homeless in our city while investors line their pockets. Mayor Brandon Scott said in his State of Baltimore address that he has directed his team to do what is necessary to ensure that no homeowner loses their home to tax sale. Well then, we declare it necessary for the Director of Finance, Henry Raymond, to cancel this year's tax sale. While an equitable collection and recovery system can be created in its place and a fair tax rate and assessment process are instituted, we can't have an equitable, just, or well-governed city while a predatory practice such as tax sale exists. This isn't a game of revenue over everything. This is about governing for the people above all. Anything less is plantation politics and a predatory practice of the lowest sort, specifically harming Baltimore's Black community. The time for change is now. We can't afford to wait for City Hall to act. If you know someone who needs help getting out of tax sale, have them reach out to the SOS Fund. It's not trauma informed either. I just realized I kind of left that out, but I think the content speaks for itself, and I think we can all understand it's traumatic to be in a situation where you stand at risk of losing your home or actually do lose your home.
Councilwoman Ramos, I'm not sure if your hand is still raised.
Yeah, I raised it again. Well, because I have to just say, Mika, it's been great to be a partner with you in this fight this year, because this is the year. This is the year that it has become plain and clear that this practice can no longer happen in Baltimore. And I'm glad that we have the attention of the the mayor on this. Let's see what happens, but we've got to continue to put the pressure. So anybody who knows of somebody who's dealing with this issue, the SOS Fund is great resource. Nika is an awesome resource, and we're going to need your help, frankly. There's no question about it. We need more calls going into the Department of Finance and the mayor. We'll be doing more in terms of media and drumbeat to get this issue at the forefront, because we have to move the tax sale, take homeowners out of the tax sale this year, and then move forward on reforms to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And now's the time. So I'm grateful for Nika for leading us in this work this year, and all the partners that are also doing it. So I hope everybody can help us out with this. This is a big deal.
I see several hands, and this is the part that I always feel terrible about. We can probably hear from one more person, because then we have one more of our task force members we want to highlight today. So Phil, can I hear from you? And then we're going to move.
I was going to allow Monica to go.
You were going to defer to Monica? Okay, Monica.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mika, for such a powerful video, and for your strong words and the work that you do. I have a question, and they just follows up. Councilwoman Ramos, is what can we do to support organizing our neighbors and our communities? Because sometimes, when you're struggling with housing, it's just very difficult to think about advocating for yourself. So what will be your 2 words of advice about what we can do to help organize our communities?
So I would quickly say that using the existing community associations that are there to organize a mutual benefit group. One of the neighborhoods that is escaping me in East Baltimore is creating their own tax sale bailout to organize the neighbors to make sure that everyone in their neighborhood is covered. But if that's not an option, reaching out to Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service or the Pro Bono Resource Center or MCRC are also vehicles for people to get help, but also begin to participate in the advocacy surrounding tax sale.
So thank you so much, Nika, who is truly, truly leading this fight against predatory tax sales, along with my great colleague, Councilmember Ramos, who's also really been out there. And, one of the things with this task force, when we break into work groups, there's going to be one work group that really focuses on some policy solutions to reducing trauma. And it is my hope that ending or drastically changing tax sale is one of those policy recommendations to add a little more heft to, of course, Mayor Scott, and what he said. So again, thank you, Nika. Excellent presentation. And now for our last one of the night, Ms. Bruce.
Hey, y'all. Sorry, I was just being dramatic. Teresa Bruce, city schools teacher, social studies, best subject ever for anyone listening. Anywho, I thought it would be awesome to just highlight my passion, which is in education, working with our middle schoolers, because I'm a middle school educator. So keeping in line with the presentation format this evening, there's a video from my undergraduate alma mater, UMBC, the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, highlighting what I do. Could you play the video, please? That a narrative, a story, has a dominant perspective or a dominant narrative, and it has a silence narrative. Today, we're going to specifically look at Baltimore's dominant narrative.
Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Bruce, and I am an amazing UMBC alum, class of 2009. While there, I majored in political science and social work, and I was a member of the Sondheim Scholars Program. At the University of Chicago, I picked up a master's in public policy with a focus in K-12 urban education reform. Currently, I am an amazing 8th grade social studies teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools. So notice, I'm on slide 5, right? I'm on slide 5. You should probably be on slide 5. So what's interesting about being a teacher is your classroom is sort of like your space. It's your home, it's your community. When you're in these walls, you and your scholars create your own community. And it's very interesting during this pandemic to rethink the way community has to be developed. But I do have to say that I am thankful, though, because we're in the midst of a pandemic, that we are working from home. And it's challenged me actually to find different ways to engage scholars, to push myself to learn more ways to engage them not only in the work, but to learn and develop and grow relationships. I think the biggest thing, it doesn't matter if you're in the brick and mortar building or if you're online, it's about relationships. And yes, they're harder to build virtually. I'll be the first to say that. But by being yourself, I often start my classes with corny jokes.
The corny joke of the day.
Right? Because that's who I am. I love a good corny joke. I love a witty pun. And my students know that about me. And when young people relate to you as a person, they're more apt to at least try. And then when you acknowledge them, you acknowledge their efforts, you work with them, they're gonna try harder, right? Because there's an old saying, people don't care what you know until they know you care. And it's the same now virtually. We have to continue to show our students that we care. UMBC continued my joy for learning. I've always loved learning. I've always loved to read. I've been a book nerd for as long as I can remember. I love school. I love learning. And UMBC further capitalized on that through the experiences I had with the classes and the professors. UMBC continued that idea that it's okay to be smart, that it's cool to be smart. And that's what I think about when I'm in my classroom every day. I get, not everybody likes history, right? Like we all have subjects we love more than others. But what I want for young people is to at least find some joy when they come into my room. To at least feel that maybe if you don't like my subject, you still feel that you can talk to me and we can connect on something else and I can support you in your goals. UMBC capitalized on that for me, and that's what I seek to do with my young people today, with my scholars.
So thank you all. Wow, that's kind of like promotion for my undergrad as well. That's like who I am and what I love. I love education, and I see it as a vehicle for our young people to further be a part of our city, right? Like they're already there, but I think oftentimes we forget how valuable their contributions are and who they are. And that's how I see my role. So any questions? That was me counting like teacher wait time, just in case anybody was wondering what I was doing. All right.
I just want to say Ms. Bruce is every bit the real deal. I've gotten to see her class in person. It was amazing. Once there's no more COVID, y'all should go check it out over at KIP. And just a really, really, really inspiring teacher. So thank you for what you do and the joy and love and relationships that you bring to it. Appreciate you.
And I just wanted to say, I could just see the passion in your eyes. I hear it in your voice. I wish I had teachers like you. You are amazing, and that's your passion, and it shows all over you. So thank you for the work that you're doing with our youth, because it's not easy. So thank you for that.
All right, outstanding. Well, thank you so much to Ms. Bruce, to Nika, to everybody, to Donna. Videos have apparently become really popular, which is great. But do not feel obligated to do a video. If you just want to do a TED Talk or whatever, feel free to do that, or a TikTok, I suppose, as well. All right, we are now going to transition to the diversity, equity, and inclusion portion of the show. Our DEI star, Jabari Lyles, is back with us. So Jabari, I'm going to turn it right over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Zeke. DEI star. Wow. I have to put that one on my resume. That's awesome. So it's really nice to be here with y'all again, back with the DEI work. I've called it the DEI download, and I think that it's going to be an ongoing portion of our conversation moving forward as we position ourselves to make change. Educating ourselves on diversity and difference is going to be super important. Making sure that we don't repeat some of the mistakes of the past by learning about how they showed up. So I'm really excited to be a part of the team to offer that moment for you ongoing on these calls. I'm joined by a couple of other folks who I'm collaborating with, Faria and Colby. They are currently on this small team of folks who are collaborating and thinking about this, and we always welcome more folks if that's something you're interested in. And so I'll also pause real quick to see if Faria or Colby want to say what's up.
Hi everyone, Fariha here. I'm a teacher in city schools. Teresa, I'm so inspired by your video. Jabari, you led an amazing session and I'm excited to collaborate with you and bring all of everybody's words and vision to life. Thanks everyone.
Awesome. And do we have Colby with us?
I think Colby's not feeling well, so they're not here today.
Awesome. I will send well wishes on behalf of Colby. So I want to share my screen just to do a little report back on things that we heard last time and also get some input for what this may look like moving forward. So let's go ahead and get that queued up. Okay, everybody sees that all right? Great. It's like these little phrases that we've learned to say. Does everyone see that? You're on mute. Okay, so here we go. So first of all, just, our agreements. These were our community agreements, things that we are going to agree on as a community as we have these conversations. And so we agree to promote self-care and healing within ourselves and each other, to assume our best intentions, but own our impact, to listen, to understand, to take space and make space, to honor lived experience, to be solutions driven, to create a culture of learning, and to be aware of which voices are not represented. We agreed confidentiality with a twist, which is what's said here stays here, but what is learned here leaves here, and to communicate with courage. So those are our community agreements. And before they're completely baked in, I just wanted to give an opportunity for folks to add anything that they don't see that they think should be included on this list. I'll give just a couple moments for that. Okay, well, this list is ongoing. It's a living, breathing list. And so if we feel as though we need to come against, adding something to our community agreements, then that's always a thing. So really appreciate everybody's input to developing those agreements as we move forward. These were what we heard as our values, things that we hold to be important on our group. And so those things are experience. It was very clear through all the notes that we want to center and honor the experiences, number one, of people who are survivors of trauma, but also number two, everyone's authentic and individual stories. Liberation and love, healing, anti-racism, appreciation, liberation, and commitment. Are there any other values that folks don't see represented here that you think should be added to the list? Okay, just checking the chat. Equity. Equity, the word of the day. Let's go ahead and make sure that we put equity on there. Honesty. Authenticity. Outcomes. Justice. I really like that. Love it. Any others? Really good stuff happening in the chat. Integrity. Very delicious words people are coming up with here. Radical imagination. Okay. Yes, radical imagination. Trust. Very good. These are all really awesome words. So we'll make sure that we add these and make sure that they influence, how we move forward, making sure that we are working and communicating in alignment with our values. So these are some potential topics. I think that what we envisioned so far is for each meeting for about 15 or 20 minutes, we would offer the group a topic to learn about, to discuss, and based on the notes, based on what we're here to do, these are some topics that we're currently considering. And so I really want some feedback about these topics. If there's something, and this is in no way like, these are the topics and I was all right and nothing like that, right? This is a collaborative process. So if there are things that you think need to be added or taken away, really envision 15 or 20 minutes during each meeting, a topic that we can delve in a little bit. And so far I have an intro to intersectionality and systemic oppression. So we say these words, but let's make sure that we build our own collective definitions about what they mean, making sure that we understand intersectionality rooted in the oppression and experience of Black women as Kimberly Crenshaw intended, and not just this like, we're all different type thing. So make sure that we really understand what intersectionality and systemic oppression is. Delving into the history of racism in Baltimore City, which is in many ways how we got here to this group. And so really taking a look at what that history looks like in our city, defining anti-racism. And I think that for me, what that means is understanding anti-racism, not just as an identity, but as an action, as a process. And so what does it mean to actively be anti-racist? An intro to gender and sexuality. And so, understanding what gender is, what gender isn't, what sexual orientation is, some of those keywords, some of our do's and don'ts. We know that our trans community is suffering some of the worst traumas in our city. Yesterday was the International Transgender Day of Visibility. So really offering an opportunity for our community to understand what those words and communities are. Capitalism and the trauma of poverty, very germane for our conversations here in Baltimore. Misogyny and gender-based trauma in immigrant and refugee communities, and then accessibility 101, understanding ableism. I see here in the chat, space to fail, the cost of being twice as good. Wow. Race-based trauma, unpacking racism in healthcare. Awesome. Impact of trauma on the brain. These are all really great topics, and I'll make sure that I include them in the list here. And so what's going to happen is the little group that I'm working with will think about how to put together little moments for our work group to consider for 15 or 20 minutes. And so we may be reaching out to some of you for some of the expertise and resources you have around how to talk about some of this stuff. I see generational trauma, which is a huge conversation that needs to happen. And I have some additional support here with immigrant and refugee trauma. So this is what we have so far, and I really appreciate the feedback and the active collaboration, and really excited to offer this for you all. So if you have any questions, you know where to find me, but that's my little moment here.
Thank you so much, Jabari. I am like totally excited about this roadmap that you have for us. This is Tisha talking. I don't know if you if you recognize my voice, but thank you so much, Jabari. Super exciting. Next on our agenda is establishing a shared and common language. That's very, very important. We want to be on the same page. We want to be talking about the same things. We want to be using the same language. When you say trauma and I say trauma, we want to make sure that those two things mean the same thing. And as we try to further this conversation. So we are going to bring in two local experts, Tamar and Erica. And Tamar is going to do trauma 101 with us. And Erica is going to talk to us about what does trauma look like in Baltimore. So again, in the spirit of learning and gaining common understanding and a common language, I'm really excited to pass the mic to Tamara for our trauma one-on-one discussion.
Thank you, Tisha. And hey, everyone. So yeah, Anne asked if I could pull together some slides that just kind of would help us form a common language around how we're thinking about different concepts in trauma. So I know that I'm talking to a room full of experts here. I know that the slides are not going to cover everything, and I really encourage folks to just speak up and sort of add to what I have here or push back against anything that feels not right, so that we can sort of, establish how we want to think and talk about these concepts. So let me share these slides. Okay. Can you all see? Okay. All right. So I wanted to just start with this image because when I think about trauma, I think about this sense of each of us being nested in these different levels. And I'm sure you've all seen these kinds of figures, but the idea that trauma happens to us as individuals, but it also happens interpersonally and at a community level and a society level. And I feel like just wanted to sort of frame the discussion that way. So in terms of individual trauma, this is a definition I pulled from SAMHSA, the idea that individual trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that's experienced as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening and has lasting adverse effects on functioning, on mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. And these traumas can come from actually experiencing events or from witnessing events or from even hearing about events. So just want to pause here a moment and see if, are there other things that are not here that you would want to see here? What are your thoughts on this slide? And let me see if I can even see the chat here. Okay. All right. I don't see any hands, so I'm just going to move on to, we know there are a lot of different types of trauma. These are just some traumatic experiences, not a complete list and not in a particular order. But, ranging from seeing violence in the community, being exposed to violence, bullying, discrimination, racism, microaggressions, which are not really micro, natural disasters, wars, political persecution, refugee experiences, all of these can be trauma. Also wanted to put on here adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, since this has become just a really common way of looking at trauma, studying trauma. So as most of you know, or maybe all of you know, ACEs are potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood. And the three main types of ACEs are here in this graphic. So abuse, neglect, and what they're calling household dysfunction these are generally considered sort of 10 key ACEs: physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, physical or emotional neglect, and then living with a family member who has mental illness, seeing interpersonal violence in the home, divorce, substance use of a parent or family member, having a family member or parent incarcerated. And there is an ACEs checklist that's been used really widely. They're now including experience of racism and I believe community violence as well. And so one of the reasons the ACEs had become so popular as a way of studying trauma, I think, is just because of a lot of research that's been done using the scale and showing that the more of these adverse experiences people have, the more they're at risk for various physical and mental health problems over the whole life course. And that relationship is really strong. Sort of the more ACEs you have, the more at risk you have. And also the measurement of this has become really common, but just to keep in mind that this doesn't cover all trauma. And so trauma is kind of a broader umbrella, I would say, than ACEs. And let me just pause here. It's hard. Whoops, let me go back for a second. I just want to see if people have comments. It's a little hard for me to see what's going on while I'm showing the slides. So does anybody have a comment so far, or feel like, what's not on these slides that you would want to see, or how are you receiving this so far?
Shauna, I think coming off mute to share your comment would be awesome.
All good. Yeah. The only thing that I thought it would be helpful to amplify as well is the nuance and the impact of historical trauma and intergenerational trauma, and the ways that these collective trauma responses are often considered cultural when we don't have a clear orientation and acknowledgement of systematic harm.
Yes, thank you so much for raising that. So that's coming up, and I would love to hear you weigh in a little more as I get to that piece. So I started with individual, but I think you're absolutely right. And I think that the frame of thinking not only about us as individuals, but as us in systems, social systems, right, is really important. So the next slide I have here is about community level trauma. And this definition really pins that as trauma that affects social groups or neighborhoods that are long subjected to interpersonal violence, structural violence, and historical harms. And the causes of community trauma lie in the historical and ongoing root causes of social inequities, including poverty, racism, sexism, oppression, and power dynamics, and the erasure of culture and communities. So I think very much it's important to think about trauma, not just on the individual level, but on the community level as well. And then Shauna mentioned also this really critical dimension of historical trauma, and that's on the next slide. So thinking about historical trauma as the cumulative, multi-generational, collective experience of emotional and psychological injury in communities and in descendants. So, we were touching already on, what's the history of racism in Baltimore? What's the history, for example, of sort of racist taxing practices, redlining, all of the racist community level way in terms of structural forces of oppression, and also plays but often stress. Think of three different types of stress: the positive stress that maybe like planning someone's wedding, or having it may be a big event at school that you're performing in, and it's sort of exciting and scary, but it's overall a really positive thing. So that's a kind of stress that is not at all harmful. It's a part of life. Then there's tolerable stress. So maybe you're going through a period of like a lot of exams at school, or really big demands at work, but it's tolerable. It's within your capacity to handle it, and there's things that are emerging from it. But then there's toxic stress, damaging, and it feels like it's more than you can handle. And that kind of, we're in it, and then it calms down, and that fight or flight switch goes off. Is like permanently in go, and that has long-term negative impacts. So, cortisol is a stress hormone that people study a lot. That floods for too long. This picture shows three areas of the brain that is very much involved in like alerting us to danger. And the amygdala gets kind of oversensitized to danger. So it's like constantly seeing danger. The prefrontal cortex is helpful for sort of like like calming the amygdala down, or kind of like figuring out like how much of this danger do we really need to react to or not. It kind of moderates the input from the amygdala, but the prefrontal cortex it tends to communicate less well with the amygdala over time in people exposed to, like they're constantly in danger. Now, of course, people may be constantly in danger. It's possible to be in a state of ongoing danger and trauma, and to be as adaptive, and in fact may be sort of hurt you in some things. I mean, there are many sort of pathways to how these can become problems. And they then compound each other, right? So once you have anxiety or depression, that in itself makes it hard, really create a lot of different problems. And I didn't put here the physical health issues. Readiness for danger is really wearing on the body and the brain. And so it creates these long-term risks for heart disease and diabetes and various kinds of problems, including earlier mortality. So really a lot of sort of cascading impacts. And, wanted to mention post-traumatic stress disorder in particular, since that's often what's talked about in relationship to trauma exposure. So, of course, not everybody who's exposed to a certain event necessarily responds in the same way. So not everybody that's exposed to a natural disaster, for instance, develops PTSD. There's a lot of different factors that go into who does and who doesn't. But this is one of the most common sort of mental health issues that can develop. And I just put up here some of the core areas of different symptoms. And to get the actual diagnosis, you need a certain number from each category over a period of a month, and they have to impair your functioning. But you can see the kinds of things that folks with PTSD. I'm gonna stop sharing here, whoops, and just pause. And I think I used up my time there, but yeah, look, I set an alarm, it just went off. But I don't know if there's any comments or anything that raised for people. Oh, I can see the chat now. So let's see. Oh, these are great comments. Important to understand that the event is not the trauma. It is the fact that the event can overwhelm our capacity to cope. Great point. Any event can overwhelm us depending on how the individual has experienced the event. Just a thought. I think that's a great thought. I agree. And Phil, we need to be thinking about how to expand healing in addition to identifying the previous and existing inequities. For example, how we can create organizations, systems, or communities that are healing centered. Yes, these are great suggestions. And then Fariha, I think we should also stay fiercely assets-based as we address trauma and dig deeper to alleviate. Yes. Yes. And I think, I started in psychology and then moved into public health. And part of the reason for that was sort of the pathologizing way that my training often made things seem. And so, yes, I think, one of the things about trauma, I think that all of these things I was just talking about with how our brains and bodies react, they are normal human responses. And I don't like the idea of thinking about people as being pathologized by these things. And I think a strength-based approach is really, really important in this work. Well, Anne, should I stop? I don't want to eat into your time, Erica. So I know there's still some more comments here, but Anne, you can tell me if we need to move on.
Yeah, I think we do need to pause tomorrow. And I do see your hand, Monica, but what I'd like to do is at least give Erica the opportunity to present. And then if we have a little bit of time left over, we can come back. We always have to get Anne's permission to be off schedule. So in the spirit of moving forward on the agenda, you did a great job, Tamar. Thank you. We have comments in the chat, which we will keep in the minutes and reflect on. But I do want to go on and pass it over to Erica, who is ready to talk about how trauma shows up in Baltimore. You ready, Erica?
Just waiting for my camera. Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. You got it.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen and talk about how trauma shows up in communities in Baltimore. And I won't just be talking about the community at large. I'll be talking about other communities as well, because I think we mostly have the conversation like, how does trauma impact residents and community members? So I like us to just pay attention a little bit deeper than that. So there's some things here that'll be obvious. So in the work that we do specifically with Baltimore Ceasefire and even at the Mediation Center, just addressing violence before and during and after, one way that trauma shows up is that people target hopelessness at things that are aiming to make things better. So for example, anytime there's a new initiative, even if it's a grassroots one, people can be really quick to say that the positive effort is not going to work. People will go so far as to look for reasons to attack the person or to attack the movement. And so this is a result of people believing that healing is not for them, right? Because of all of the things that they've seen and experienced. And so hopelessness sets in places that even when something is coming to be of help, people are quick to say that, that it's not going to work. It also shows up kind of related to the hopelessness is mistrust of people, systems, agencies, because they get failed so often. So you go to the social workers and the therapists and the, city agencies and the school counselor and whoever it is you're going to for help. Very often, those systems are set up in ways that are traumatic and trigger people. Or they exacerbate traumas or lack that people are already experiencing in their lives. And so people are just waiting for a system to fail them. So even when you're showing up saying, here's what I'm going to do for you, it's very hard for people to believe it because people have been lied to so much. And being lied to over and over again is actually a trauma because the things that we're lied to about have to do with our survival. There's a lot of shock and disbelief targeted at the idea that your own voice can even have an impact. So when you've experienced a lot of trauma and you've been socialized and taught to believe that you don't matter, then of course it's very hard to believe that your voice matters when somebody comes along and says any little thing you do to help somebody else or help a situation that's impacting your life or the lives of people you love, that matters. What do you want to do about it? What do you want to say about it? People have a hard time believing that anything they do can help or can work. So they wait for somebody else to come and do the work. And so we call this reverse othering, right? So in general, when we talk about othering people, it is like seeing ourselves as different from them because they're worse than we are. And so we call them like those people. But in this reverse othering that we talk about in our work, what we see is because people don't believe in their own voices, they expect that the quote unquote do-gooders are going to be their saviors, and that somehow these people are more special than they are. Also, one way that trauma shows up is that people use violence as their language. So recently, especially, I've been having a lot of conversations. I'm just realizing there's a typo right here. I'm having a lot of conversations about how if we're asking people not to be violent and violence is their language because of all of the trauma that they've experienced, then we have to replace that language with something else that they will think will be just as effective as violence. So one thing that happens is the reason that people default to violence as well is because they really believe that the other ways to address their conflicts and situations, those other ways are not going to be as effective as violence will be, right? Because we live in a system of violent oppression that subdues us, and then we watch those in power use violence to get what they want. So the messaging that we're constantly receiving is that what power is, it looks like being violent to somebody else. So when I feel disempowered, when I feel misunderstood, when I think somebody trying to play all in my face,
the thing to do is, I bet if I do something violent to them, they will get the message, right? And so the belief that there could be another way that's just as effective as violence is very hard for people to believe. There's a collective depression and anxiety in neighborhoods, which got talked about, you know, in the last presentation. So specifically, it's a tangible thing. It's not something that is just, you know, on paper, you know, in somebody's research. Literally, if we're doing murder spaces in different neighborhoods, if there was a murder in a neighborhood that generally has more resources, more access to opportunities, you know, they're not worried about their housing or where they're going to get healthy fruits and vegetables. There's a murder there. We walk into that neighborhood, it feels very different than walking into a neighborhood minus all of those things that I just mentioned. And so although murder happened in both places, the collective energy in both places is still very different. So in places where there's already been a collective depression and anxiety, a murder just, you know, is piled on top of that. Another tangible thing is when a neighborhood or a community has a lot of trash all over it, because the trauma piece that what you're seeing is not that people are just trifling and don't care about themselves. It just doesn't occur to people sometimes that we could get together and clean up the neighborhood, and we can do things to keep it clean. And again, it goes back to not believing that anything I do will matter, right? Because if people are just going to keep throwing trash, then what am I going to do about that, right? And there's a numbness that you have to develop in order to walk through that kind of trash every day, and you just kind of block it out, so that because you're just trying to survive to get to the bus stop or, you know, get to the store, whatever it is you're trying to do. So you're kind of blocking out how horrible everything looks around you. And there's a part of it that because you've been taught and conditioned that you really don't matter, there's a piece of it that stops it from occurring to you that you could fix it, because that trash is also an indicator that you don't matter, right? And that's what you believe anyway. And then of course there's a numbness to the violence, trash, blight, bad education, liquor stores everywhere. Like all of the things that we know aren't good for anybody, people get used to it being their reality. And then there's a disbelief that healing can occur and is available to people. We label ourselves negatively and with pride. So here's where we enter Bodymore Murderland. And I'm a live and die in these streets. And I'll be surprised if I make it past age, whatever it is, right? That when you believe that this is your reality, we are here to shine. We are here to be in our greatness. So when you live within systems that are constantly denying you the opportunity for your own greatness, you're going to find a way to shine in whatever it is you're in. So if what I have to live in is a violent place that tells me I'm not worth anything, I'm going to find a way to glorify those things. And so it looks crazy from the outside looking in, but it is absolutely an impact of trauma that we end up labeling ourselves in negative ways because we think we can't do anything about those negative things. And so we use those things to then try to find something to be proud about. The expectation that somebody is going to die just because they have a conflict. So like we live in a place where you think somebody gets killed every day in Baltimore. It's not actually true that somebody gets killed every single day in Baltimore. And so while conflict is inevitable, murder doesn't have to be inevitable. Violence doesn't have to be inevitable just because there's a conflict, but trauma makes us think that both violence and murder are normal. Then there's trauma in the police community. And I added this on purpose because of the work that we do around showing up in murder spaces. The amount of evidence that is left behind when a murder has happened, crime tape, gloves, needles, the little plastic stuff that is left, like when they were trying to save somebody's life, all of that stuff is often left just right in the neighborhood. And so for those of us who clean up after police, it feels to us like somebody's mindset must have been, oh, well, the murder already happened, so, or this neighborhood is already broken down, so, you know, leaving some crime tape on somebody's fence that they got to walk outside and see, right? So yes, what they're doing by not cleaning up is now, re-traumatizing this community that's just experienced the murder. But what it also says is you are now numbed by the amount of trauma you've seen, that it doesn't dawn on you how messed up it is for you to leave all of this stuff in people's neighborhoods. And then there's this part where racism is a huge trauma, because when you go into whiter, more affluent neighborhoods after a murder has happened, it is pristine. There's no sign that a murder happened there, right? And then you go into, and literally one day I had to do one ritual in Park Heights and one, like right up the street more, where there are more affluent people living. And at the Park Heights spot, we had to clean up the crime tape and everything else. But in the other spot, we couldn't even find where the murder happened, because it looked like nothing ever happens bad around here, because somebody took the time to make sure that they cleaned up every speck of lint that would ever indicate that something traumatic happened there. And so for us, we have a lot of conversations about how much trauma first responders must be experiencing, that, the hurt people thing, that it doesn't occur to them that they need to be just as diligent in every single space to leave it pristine, as pristine as they can. Then there's trauma in the activist community, which I don't think we talk about a lot, but I often hear people who are in wider spaces come to grassroots spaces and say, why don't y'all all get together? Y'all working in silos. Y'all need to get together and work. And what people don't realize is just because a lot of people are activists doing good work, don't mean that they get along, doesn't mean that they know how to resolve conflicts that they have with one another, doesn't mean that they trust each other, right? And so because a lot of us doing the work are navigating our lifetimes of trauma and trauma that still happens to us in our lives, you see trauma show up in the activist community. And so we say things like, I'll sleep when I die. So we'll just be going and going and going, no matter what tragedy is happening in our lives, we're still showing up for Baltimore and pouring everything into Baltimore. So there's a lack of self-care that happens. And then we have a lack mentality a lot of times in general. So, and people will make you feel bad if you want to be an activist who's not struggling to pay your bills, right? So this idea that there's an expectation that if you're on the front lines and if you really care about Baltimore, you should be financially broke and yourself struggling to pay all your own bills while you're saving the city, that somehow that's something to be celebrated and you're noble for doing that, right? And so this idea that the people who are trying to heal the world should also be struggling in their own lives is just, that is clearly a sign that trauma has happened. Also, within good work, people try to compete with other activists and movements. So for example, you'll hear people bragging about they're the ones doing the best work, or somebody else's work doesn't work, or how come people give so much attention to so-and-so, but they hate on me, and why is this? And there's this idea that I used to believe myself, and I get, and there are absolutely some places where this is true, but it's even when it's true, it is an impact of us having been under racist systems, violent systems of oppression for so long as activists, and having to navigate things like COINTELPRO and our phones being tapped and, being followed and just all kinds of things, that then this belief emerges that if you're too loved, it must be that you aren't gangster enough in your work. It must be that you aren't, you're too accepted by people, by the system. And so, and it may be that, like, so for example, I'm somebody who's greatly loved, but I don't talk a lot about how much I am harassed, how my phone has been tapped, how memes have been made about me, how, people threaten me. I don't talk about those things, right? So if all you see is that somebody seems to be really loved, your trauma says to you as an activist, that person must not really be about the work. Then there's this thing, the question really is to stand on your square or not stand on your square. So there's a lot of times where we struggle with compromising our integrity for money, funding, access to wider, richer spaces, etc. And then the mistrust that creates within ourselves and among our peers in the activist community. And so funders or donors or people who say they're coming to, they really want to help your work, they'll also put stipulations on what their funding is going to be, or they're questioning you about how you do your work. And I'm like, either you're going to give me the money or you don't, or you're not. You either trust that I know what I'm doing or you don't, right? And so turning down money to stand in your values and to stand on your square is a very difficult choice. And it's also a re-traumatizing choice to have to make, right? And then the last thing is there is an isolation that comes with being seen as somebody that's trusted to lead. Like everything hits differently when you're in the public eye. People think they want to be seen as this quote unquote savior of Baltimore or leader in Baltimore. And from the outside in, they think they know what the experience is that those people are having, but they really don't have any idea. And so when you get there, it's a very lonely place very often. And I think that activists often struggle with how to get support around it. What do I do that I feel this like how am I surrounded by this many people and this loved and this respected? And I feel this lonely because nobody really understands what it takes to be me in this work and in this world. And without, if I had not been impacted by so much trauma, I absolutely would be able to navigate all of those things much better, right? So yeah, that's all I got. So I'm going to stop sharing now.
Bam.
Can we please give a big round of applause to
Tamar and
Erica and Dr. Tamar. Awesome.
Bam.
I apologize for any edges I ripped or any feelings that got hurt or any, but you know, blame Zeke. He asked me to talk about it, so I can only talk about what I experienced and how I see it.
Erica, the only thing I can say is amen. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So listen, again, thank you so much, Erica, for your vulnerability and realness. Thank you, Dr. Tamar, for your concision and thoughtfulness. We're going to be doing these over the next 2 weeks. Then we're going to start having subcommittees. The way we'll work it is one meeting, we'll do a subcommittee breakout thing, and then the next meeting will bring us all back together. Then a subcommittee, then bring us all back together. So we'll continue this kind of flow, but also just know that in a couple of sessions later, we're also going to have subcommittees where a lot of our work is going to move forward. But this was great. Thank you all so much for all the energy, for just showing up in this kind of way, for all the amazing videos, the slideshow, the TED Talk, just Erica doing her thing. Very, very much appreciated. Look forward to seeing folks in 2 weeks. I am going to tap a few folks behind the scenes to do some more presentations like what Dr. Tamar and Erica just did on some of these concepts. In the meantime, though, we do need 3 more people to present about who they are. And 2 more people in? Okay, we're just going to do 2. So if I could get just 2 volunteers for next week or 2 weeks from now to do the self-presentation piece.
They're all like, I can't make a movie in 2 weeks. So.
Come on, somebody. Ann and I are both former teachers, just like Ms. Bruce, so we're also comfortable with silence and people not talking. But
I'm happy to go. I'm not going to have a beautiful movie, but I think that's fine.
Outstanding. Jabari, one more.
I can go too, if you need me to.
Mr. Parsons, you're on. Perfect. Awesome. All right. See you in 2 weeks.